Hey there, I'm Jackie Ferris. This week we are at Winterthur checking out a new exhibit called Conversations with the Collection. Basically, it's the backstory to some amazing pieces you're just going to be fascinated by. Get ready, the 302 is serving up a tasty treat. We are at one of our favorite places, Winterthur, to talk about their new exhibit, Conversations with the Collection. We're joined now by one of our friends, Ann Wagner, who is the curator of decorative arts. Ann, thank you so much for coming back on the 302.
It's always a delight to have you here, and it's fun to be able to share some changes in our galleries with you.
So let's talk a little bit about this exhibit. It's a little bit of everything from beautiful, necklaces to plates and furniture, and there's even a gorgeous chandelier. What is Conversations with the Collection?
Thank you for asking. And Conversations is, of course, what we're doing right now, but it's what goes on behind the scenes with our staff, our conservation staff, our curators, some of our students, and certainly with our public, and thinking about ways to have dialogue. So in fact, I think when we turn the lights out here in the galleries, sometimes the objects even talk to themselves a little bit. But, it's just wonderful to have the stories that we have and to share them in new ways with the public. And I think that's what the theme of this gallery is, and we are changing it throughout the year and into next year, so the dialogue will continue.
I think one of the most fascinating things is, in addition to all the research that you do before something hits the floor, there's also a team of folks who are back there making sure that before something goes on display, that it's in a state that is as close to the way it was back in the day. Tell us about that.
We do keep that in mind, and of course the research is informing that, but we understand that materials change over time too. And so part of this exhibit is looking at that. I have a gold-plated silver chocolate set that really hasn't changed much in its 100 years of life, but we also have an iron lily sculpture that has changed tremendously because it's been out in the garden. And so Mother Nature and time have already put an imprint on it that we need to reckon with. And those are our questions. How far do we take it? Do we think about interpreting it from its origin, or do we work with it today as it is and give it the best life we can for the future?
Now, you mentioned the hot chocolate set, and that's this set right here. So, on first look, when you acquired this, tell me how you found out about it.
Well, of course, aesthetically and visually, I fell in love with it right away.
Sure.
And so your questions just mushroom up inside and say, how come it is? Who made it? Who owned it? How did they use it? All those questions come into play. And then, of course, the questions of, do we need it for Winterthur? Is it the right thing to have in our collection? And you start researching around the time of origin, any kind of provenance, any ownership history that you can, and then understanding it in the bigger design context of the maker and why they've made it the way they have. And so I dig into it on that end. And my conservator, my colleagues here, in this case, Lauren Fair, who's the object's conservator, looks at it and says, it's in a good enough condition that we can take it and we can work with it if we need to. And then we take it to a committee and have an approval process.
The museum sees an object like this is either available at auction or being offered some other way, and then you say this would be, after you determine that it would be good for the collection, you kind of scoop it up, right?
We do, and certainly we have wish lists or priorities that we'd like for the collection, and in this case, this is 20th century metalwork, and people don't always think of Winterthur as having more modern materials like that, but we are very much adding and enlivening this collection with contemporary art in many ways. And so that was part of the decision in this case. But it's a, if you will, it's as much a permanent flower garden or a beverage bouquet as the iron lily
like
sculpture that I'm
that.
going to show you later too.
A beverage bouquet,
it is.
that really is amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, that's nice. So let's talk a little bit about the design itself. It really is gorgeous. Looks like flowers, obviously.
I'm so glad you can see that. And that was, of course, what first drew me to it. They are poppy flowers.
Okay.
Golden poppies. And we don't have any of those in the Winterthur garden, but our daffodils are just about to come up. So the color of gold is out there. But they are inspired by botanicals, but also by the California state flower, the cup of gold in Spanish for the golden poppy. And that was in 1903, adopted as the state flower for California. And the patron of this particular chocolate set chose poppies for a pretty elegant statement in gold and silver for drinking hot cocoa. She also had a punch bowl made as a big poppy flower. And she designed a patented, a poppy trophy goblet. She really endorsed the poppy flower personally in her decorative arts collection and her home entertaining and her public expression of being a Californian in her time.
Well, I'm excited to learn more about her and the set and the rest of the collection when we return.
I'm Laura Fervell. I'm the curator at the Biggs Museum of American Art in Dover, Delaware, and I love the arts on the 302.
Welcome back. We are joined by Ann Wagner to talk about conversations with the collection and specifically this hot chocolate set. Now, Ann, did you tell us a little bit about the woman? I know that the woman that owned this collection, she really had a love for California and the state flower. What was her name and what was she like?
Well, we discovered through research, because her name is not on this chocolate set anywhere. It was really challenging to figure out who she was. But she was Anita Mae Baldwin, born Baldwin, and later took that name back after she had some marriages that didn't end well. And so she was the daughter of a man called Elias Lucky Baldwin, who profited from the silver strikes, the mining discoveries in Virginia City. And the Comstock lode is how we think of that in history. And he was someone who didn't do the mining, but he did a lot of transportation and selling of things that miners needed, and he built up an enormous fortune in his lifetime. Enormous. And he bought a ranch in the San Gabriel Valley in Arcadia, near Pasadena, and it was 46,000 acres.
Wow.
He assembled lots of pieces together. He had businesses in San Francisco and in LA and other places. So Anita was his second daughter, and when he died in 1909, she inherited, the estimates are $10 million in equivalence of value. So she was a privileged and wealthy woman who was much bigger than that. She was a concert pianist early years. She was an animal lover. She was privileged, but she used her name and her security, financial security, to not only keep the ranch running with all kinds of breeding programs for kennels and horses. She had 400 peacocks in her aviaries.
That's a lot of peacocks.
A lot of peacocks. I think they're still there in Pasadena. They still have peacocks that are descendants of the Baldwin peacocks. But she also used that for, as people of her generation, I'm sorry, I should have said she was born in 1876. She was in her 30s when she settled on the ranch inherited from her father, built a 50-room mansion and an enormous complex, stables, kennels, aviaries, all of that, along the lines of what her father had started. And she got very civically active in different ways. She helped to found a hospital for children in Los Angeles. She was participated in society in San Francisco. I find her name in the newspapers
just
all
everywhere.
the time. She was an influencer in her era. She didn't have social media, but she used those newspapers.
And part of her influence was to be able to make or commission something as beautiful as this chocolate set. Now, hot chocolate, that was a bit of a luxury back in the day, right?
Well, it certainly wasn't, and It's an American product. The Spanish colonists brought it from Mexico and Central America back to Spain and brought that craze for chocolate into society and into culinary experimentation. But in Anita Baldwin's day, you could get a tin or a packet of powdered hot cocoa. So something you could make very easily. You didn't have to, in the 18th century, or late 17th century, you had to grind it and mix it, and it was kind of gritty, you know, nowhere near as sweet as we're used to it today. But when this set was made, you can see there's a creamer or a milk pitcher and a sugar bowl and little tongs. It would have been prepared in that pot. It would have already been boiled and mixed and had the sugar added. But you could sweeten it a little bit more or add all kinds of flavorings. And back in the day, certainly the spice trade and experimentation, nutmeg, cinnamon, anise. I've seen recipes for anise in your chocolate, vanilla, and certainly Central American tastes with chilies. And some kind
I've
of
actually
peppers on the side.
had a little
tried that?
spicy hot cocoa,
I don't see recipes that say anything alcoholic, but wouldn't you be tempted to put some little cherry cordial or something into your cocoa?
You know, in the right situation.
Yes, so I don't know what this actually served, but it probably was from a powdered cocoa that was mixed and prepared and then served very elegantly on a tray and brought probably for breakfast.
Oh, nice.
It's often a morning drink in the 18th and early 19th centuries. And then I get all excited, and I'm sure I'm not right about this, but these poppy flowers that are the bodies of these vessels, a wonderful student who did some research on California poppies, they're phototropic. So as the sun intensifies during the day, the flower opens up even more. And so I was wondering, are these little cups the morning? And then, you know, it's suggestive of this time of day that you'd be having your cocoa. I think cocoa is appropriate any time of day.
It's so amazing, all the meaning that goes into an object like this, a lot of thought. And we mentioned recipes, and we actually have a recipe for you, everybody out in 302 land. Tell us a little bit about the recipe and the woman that we're getting it from. And if you want to look, there's a little QR code in the corner. All you got to do is take your phone and click it, and you'll be able to get a copy of this recipe and some of the other recipes that are contained with it. So tell us about it.
Sure. Well, I did a little digging in our library, and we have lots of wonderful early household cooking and recipe books. And one of them, and a very influential one, was Catherine Beecher. And she's maybe more forgotten today, but she was a household name because she wrote about households and about cooking and about how to set up your kitchen. She's overshadowed a little bit by her sister Harriet Beecher Stowe, who is of course the author, just a little bit. But Catherine was incredibly well known and a household name in the mid-19th century. And so she has a book of domestic recipes, things to cook at home and to make that are economical and tasty. But under beverages, she has under temperance beverages options, and that's where we see hot chocolate appearing. And the recipe is fairly straightforward. It's to have boiling water and chocolate that's been grated, because the powdered cocoa was just coming into availability then. And then to add the sugar, and maybe if you're really, really going to like it, she doesn't call for much sugar, but a little bit of spice if you are someone who is perhaps suffering from something, if you're ill. And that's drawing on that long history of chocolate also being used as a medicinal use. In the time of Anita Baldwin, I find it advertised as dietetic.
Okay.
Dietetic. Good for your body, I think, is more of that meaning.
You know what? I totally agree.
Yes.
Chocolate, I fully endorse chocolate. I want you, before we move on to our next item in the collection, show us your chocolate pot.
Oh, I brought for you, we're jumping back and forth in time, but this is not a museum object, although it could be. It's made by a contemporary tinsmith, Steve DeLille, who's a tinsmith. And he gave it to me to talk to my students about chocolate pots of the 18th century. This is a good standard design where you have a handle on the side. It's easier to pour. When you're pouring, this is not inside it, so it's going to have a little bit easier action. But this would be filled with your hot water and your chocolate already boiled and maybe some spices. When you've done that, and filled it up, it's got this enormous but really functional wooden dowel, essentially. It has a moulinet. That's why there's a hole in the lid. And that's how you know you're looking at a chocolate pot.
And
if you stabilize that handle,
you just
can you hold that?
Yes, you rub your hands together.
And so one simple way to make your chocolate frothy is to do that.
Go like that.
And it really, we have French presses and all kinds of interesting things today that do that. But this is a low-tech 18th century answer to making that beverage even more delicious.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some objects in the garden. Stay with us.
This is Wesley Paulson from Clear Space Theater giving a shout out to the 302 and thanking you for supporting live theater at the beach.
Welcome back. We have moved to a new spot and we're sitting in front of some beautiful pieces that came from the garden here. Tell me a little bit about them.
Winterthur is so much about the outdoors as well, and the conversations galleries that we are exploring today involve these dialogues with conservators and with curators like me, but also our garden staff and curators in the garden and people who care for those landscapes. And we had a little bit of an intervention many years ago about our statuary, our sculptures, and the metalwork out in the gardens. And so what you're seeing here are 3 separate examples of types of materials that we are grappling with as far as how to care for them, do we bring them in the wintertime, can we leave them out there safely and let Mother Nature hopefully not do too much to them, or do we really need to take a deeper look in the science labs and figure out what's changing in these objects? And so these are 3 examples where we could have that conversation with the public, and our labels are explaining where we are, what we've looked at so far. But we're still inquiring with these, very much so. There's a lead sculpture group behind you, and we're actively talking to the manufacturer from 100 years ago. They're still in business in London to talk about restoration or some kind of way that we can intervene in a way that's sensitive to the sculptures. They still have the molds. They still have the originals from 100 years ago when Henry Francis DuPont was buying them. So that's a tremendous resource for us. But we're in that active conversation this week. And then I have a chair that maybe looks familiar to people who are watching the 302 because it's a common form from the mid-19th century, but it's broken. And so what do? You can see how we even have the piece that's broken off, and we're trying to think about the surfaces. Do we clean it or don't we? Do we just retire it and keep it in storage and find another one? How do we represent Mr. DuPont's vision for the gardens if we start taking pieces out? And so
it really is powerful when you see the 2. One is, weathered by time and the elements, and the other looks like something that you might buy at a garden store. It's beautiful. I wanted to jump back to the iron sculpture of the cherubs. Being that the company is still in business, you learn a lot about, if there was a theme or who created it. I know that when we talk about Tiffany windows, there are certain designers like Clara Driscoll that you can attribute a certain design to. Is that the kind of thing that you're finding with this sculpture?
Oh, I wish I could tell you that.
So it's
yes,
to be determined.
It is. Well, and some are the choice that you have for garden ornament, or you had 100 years ago or more, is influenced by so many different designers. And you could have objects that are allegorical, like the seasons, figures of men and women who are representing spring and autumn and fall, or in this example, very much based on an antique classical design of cherubs, or pucci in Italian, who are holding a goblet. They're about, let's have an outdoor party, let's have a picnic, let's have a fete, let's have something that is frolicking and revelry in the landscapes. And so it's more of a common design, but I don't know who exactly modeled this sculpture for the firm in London. And so I need to dig into that a little more.
Well, perhaps it's a future show on the 302. So we go from something that's sturdy and solid, the 3 cherubs, to something that's a little more delicate, that I would imagine is harder to conserve, but probably so much fun to research, and that is this, it looks like a potted flowers.
It does. Yeah, you're talking, let me just, one comment about the cherubs. They are made from lead, and lead casts beautifully. But it's also really appealing to rodents like squirrels. And so the sculpture of the cherubs with the glass has been coated in wax that's embedded with cayenne pepper. That's our conservation decision to try to keep the critters from enjoying that lead too much. We don't have that problem with the lilies. The lilies are made out of iron. It's the work of a creative blacksmith, and then they're potted in copper with concrete in it. And so the challenge is here. Iron likes to stay outside as long as you wax it or you paint it, and so we've waxed it as well here and done a good job with that. But the concrete, when it rains and when it snows and when it ices, is having a wear and tear on the inside support system that you don't see, but it's starting to show itself on the outside, and it's cracking that pot. So our permanent botanical, our permanent iron lilies that were just one of two, were placed in the sundial garden by the designer of the gardens here, Marion Coffin, working with Henry Francis DuPont. So we know exactly where it was meant to be, and it was out in all kinds of weather. We've now brought both of them in, and we're really asking those questions. How far can we take this? What's the best way to extend their lives? And so the wax coating is one way, but the other is more about structure and stability. So our conservators are working really hard on that question.
I did not know that you had to wax coat everything, especially with the cayenne pepper. That's really fascinating.
Isn't that a fun deal? Yeah.
But I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the beautiful iron gate. Tell me about that.
I'm glad you like the gates.
It's gorgeous.
They are the work of industrial blacksmiths, if you think of it that way, with iron manufacturers. But they are designed to be an architectural ornament, a sculptural ornament, and very much functional. These opened and closed at the Winterthur Gatehouse for the better part of 50 years or more. And they are made from iron that was produced in Sweden. So that came as raw bars of iron to Philadelphia, and then was made into this very imaginative and beautiful with scrolling leaves, and it's a kind of a Baroque taste, and that was when gates had a real heyday in Europe. But looking back to that, but the flowers, you can see why Mr. DuPont and his father were intrigued by these. So
it really fits in with the entire landscape. And thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. As always, fascinating, and it's always good to see you.
We love having conversations with you, Jackie. Thank you.
We will be back, that's for sure.
Great.
Stay with us. Are you enjoying your visit to Winterthur? If you happen to visit in person, make sure you snap a few pictures and share it with us on our Facebook page. Now, here are some other things you can check out in the area. For more information on this exhibit or any of the amazing exhibits here at Winterthur, visit winterthur.org. That'll do it for this week's episode of The 302. Make sure you follow us on Facebook for behind-the-scenes footage you're just not going to get anywhere else. We're going to take you out to my favorite spot at Winterthur as we leave you, the koi pond. So enjoy. Until next time, I'm Jackie Ferris. Tell them you saw it on The 302.